Well, thank you all for being here. I appreciate also the after lunch crowd. It can be a little tempting to want to go back up to your room maybe and relax, but I think we'll have a really engaging panel today. We've got some really interesting guests, and I actually just wanted to start by introducing them. I will say their names, and then I will let them introduce themselves for just a minute or so before we get into the discussion. So seated right next to me, we have Tracy James from Pensacola. And then we have Bonnie Ibarra, am I saying that right?
Yes.
And then we have Veronica, and she's from Las Vegas, Nevada. Then we have Veronica Ragland from Phoenix, Arizona. And at last, Carrie Rodriguez from Boston, Massachusetts. Is it Boston? Or is it just outside? Anyway, that's it, Boston. All right, take it away, ladies. Tell us about yourselves.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. As Lane said, my name is Tracy James. My daughter was one of the first Opportunity Scholarship students in Florida. We actually attended the bill signing that Governor Bush had 20 years ago. And we're still fighting for educational options. I am now a grandmother. My daughter has 2 children, 6 and 2, and they both have special needs. So, you know, your job doesn't end being a mother. You go right into grandma life, and it's just as active because we do have some of the same challenges in our school district.
Great.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Bonnie Barra. I'm from Las Vegas, Nevada. I am a very busy, exhausted mother of 5 daughters that range from 5 to 23 years old. I've taken 2 kids through the public system in Clark County. I went through it myself. I now have 3 little ones in Las Vegas that I'm taking a different route that actually started in the same public school system that I've been through. I'm just a mom trying to have the best life for my kids. I'm not having them repeat the life that I saw. I'm not having them repeat the life that I've seen my peers go through when I was a kid. And I think that there has to be a parent and there has to be somebody there that is lived through that situation themselves that are going to advocate for the kids that are going through it now. So that's why I'm here.
So again, my name is Veronica Ragland, and I just wanted to start out by saying that I want to acknowledge the fact that everyone up here is here because of a heart-wrenching experience. There's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that really got us up here on this dais, and I think you'll find that in common, and many of you will be able to relate. I'd also like to say that my perspective comes from, having a legacy of educational advocacy to uphold, very similar to my colleagues as well. I have a grandmother who was born in the 1910s who had a master's degree. She taught in segregated schools. I have my mother, after the Brown v. Board decision, her high school career was interrupted because the Commonwealth of Virginia's answer to implementation was to close the black schools so those who could, and had opportunities to go elsewhere to finish their education could. So when I was coming of age and, standing on the shoulders of these amazing family members who fought for me in my education, and I had 2 girls, I knew I had to immediately go to battle for them. I have 1 gen ed, 1 sped, and both amazing young ladies. And despite the many options that the state of Arizona publicizes, reality is a different story, and we'll hear a little bit more about my fight.
Sorry, could you say what a gen ed is for somebody who might not know?
Sure, general education, typical kids, versus special education, which extraordinary kids.
Carrie.
Hi, my name is Carrie Rodriguez, and I am Matthew, Miles, and David's mom. That is why I'm here today. I am the founder of Massachusetts Parents United, which is the largest parent advocacy organization in the Commonwealth with more than 12,000 members, reaching 200,000 families every single month. I'm also the founder of the National Parents Union. I came to this work having been a former foster kid, having been expelled from public school, having scratched and clawed my way to Temple University. And that was the great shame of my life. I didn't realize how underserved I was personally until I became a single mom myself. My oldest is a kid with special needs. I was a union organizer working for the largest labor union in the world, 1199 SEIU, with 450,000 healthcare workers across the East Coast, winning battles, organizing community campaigns across the country, and losing a campaign for my own kid at the IEP table. And my son in kindergarten, who is autistic, who happens to be a child with ADHD, was suspended 36 times in kindergarten. And I sat at the end of an IEP table surrounded by educators who had already given up on my child in kindergarten. And I looked around at my community, which was largely unorganized, had no idea how little power I had as a parent, and said that this was unacceptable. And I don't get mad, I organize. And so that is what we did. We created a parent union, which in the past 24 hours has not only passed a $1.5 billion education funding bill that not only did we fight for, march on Beacon Hill to achieve, but we actually wrote. We beat back amendments to try to take out the accountability, the transparency, and innovation that we built into that bill to get it to passage. We also passed breakfast after the bell in Massachusetts, which will now feed 150,000 more children across the Commonwealth. And that is the strength of parent power. We are not empowered parents, we are parents in power, and we are coming to the table claiming our power. And Massachusetts Parents United is not unique. There's parent power across this country, and that is why we are building the National Parents Union, to come together in solidarity to build that parent voice and to empower parents on the ground who are fighting up against some of the most powerful political special interest groups in this country, so that parents can put kids at the center of our education conversations.
Well, thank you all. I'm going to deviate from my plan a little bit and just kind of riff off of what Carrie just said about parent power. I think that's a good example of what parent power looks like in practice. I'd like to see, does any of the other panelists want to share what their vision of parent power is? What does that look like for you guys? And also, just for the record, I've told them we don't have to be too polite. I'm okay if we jump in and talk to each other, talk over each other, respond to each other. That's all okay. I just want this to be a flow of a conversation here.
So I think Governor Bush made a wonderful statement today when he talked about parents having the same level of say as the unions, for example. And you were, just talking about having to battle unions. Certainly in the ideal world, we'll be able to work with unions, but parents certainly being at the table and having the same level of say.
Great. Anybody else? Okay. So I also forgot to introduce myself in terms of why I think I'm on this panel. I think I represent the gender diversity part of this panel. And, but I also have 3 kids. Maybe Cassie, do you want to put that? We have some slides. This is going to be a little loosey-goosey, but those are mine. Oh, they're so beautiful to me. So.
Gorgeous.
So the reason why I think I can relate, and the reason why I think maybe it makes sense that I'm on this panel too, moderating, is because I've had a similar experience of trying to get something for my kids. Honestly, I think my experience is the least dramatic and the least of all of these experiences here. But when I was a slightly younger man, we were ready to buy a home in Tallahassee, and I'm the breadwinner for my family. My wife stays at home, and we think that's a blessing in our family. But it meant, we had a budget, and so we found a house that we liked. It was a modest little home in a neighborhood close to town, and we got in there when our son was 4 months old. Our oldest there, he's turning 7 just next month. He'll turn 7. So we moved in the house when he was just 4 months old. And I was not thinking much about school at the time, or else maybe I wouldn't have moved in that neighborhood. But honestly, it was what I could afford. And we realized pretty quickly that none of our neighbors had kids. We had a bunch of older neighbors, which we love, and they're like surrogate grandparents for us. But we were like, why are there no kids here? And it didn't take us too long to figure out that our home is zoned for a pretty low-performing school. I don't want to disparage my city's schools, but the truth is it's kind of a crappy school. And and that concerned me, obviously, as a parent. And so when my kids were about ready to start school, I started investigating the lottery program that was available in Florida, and I applied to 5 different schools in the lottery program, and one of them responded to us and said that we made it. So I felt really lucky. We got into a pretty good charter school. There's charter schools in town that aren't so great. Florida is kind of unique because they have so many programs for school choice. And honestly, on paper, it's really strong. And as a resident there, I got to say, it's pretty good. But like the open enrollment policy in Florida allows people to go to school anywhere. That's what it says. And it sounds amazing. But the reality of it is if you can't afford to drive your kid across town or to a different county to go to a better school, or if there's no space available, then that open enrollment policy seems pretty closed pretty quickly. And so I did. I felt lucky that we were able to get our kids into, my first son anyway, into that charter school. And now his sister is there with him, and they're thriving so far. They're doing really great. So anyway, that's my story, just for the record. But I do want to talk about and have a conversation about parent power. During the opening session with Jeb Bush and Chris Stewart, I heard a pretty good applause for the line when they talked about restoring parent sovereignty in the context of schools. And I love that idea, but I wonder how much we really believe that. And I wonder how much we actually, to what extent we believe that, right? And I'll give you a little context here. I have a friend in Tallahassee who used to work with Jeb Bush, actually. He was an advisor working on literacy issues back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And we were at lunch a little while ago, and he asked me, I was kind of challenging. I was telling him, parents should have more of a say. And he's like, well, should they, though? Because if you think about it, like a doctor-patient relationship, the doctor's gone to school for all those years to learn the trade, to learn about the body and all these things in science. And the patient has not. Does it really make sense that the patient should be telling the doctor what to do? Doesn't it make sense that the people that have studied it should be running the boat? And I thought it was a good question. So I actually want to pose that question to the panel. Is this an accurate analogy? Should parents, are parents like the patient that should just do what they're told?
Whoa,
I would say no.
That's what I want to know. Yeah, let's hear it.
Okay,
No.
a doctor needs to get consent, okay? There is no, you don't have to go to that doctor. In this situation, I don't have a choice. My children, by law, have to go to school. And I remember sitting at the end of that table realizing I had no power and being forced to trust these people who were disgusted with my kid in kindergarten because he wouldn't sit at the rug at rug time. And I remember sitting there being like, I'm sorry, are you this aggravated with a 5-year-old because he wants to get up and play with the musical instruments? You cannot control your disgust, even in front of me as a parent? And I have to hand over the most precious thing in my life and trust that these people are going to be nice to this baby, and I could tell it was not happening. So I think it's a very different dynamic. And again, we have to provide consent as patients to if we're going to be operated on, we can go get second opinions. We have options. If you have insurance, you can get another doctor. There's a whole host of things. So I would push back.
Yeah, great.
Very much
Anybody
so.
else?
Absolutely push back. And first I must say, and this is coming from the child support world, I don't know if you could have chosen any other picture that would demonstrate that you don't need a paternity test going on here. Yeah, listen, we get to choose what coffee we drink. We get to choose what outfit we wear. We could get to choose what session you sit in this afternoon. So why wouldn't we be able to choose what school option? And Lynn, you were alluding to the fact that similar to Arizona, there's a plethora of choices that we have on the menu. But when it comes to practice, and essentially my situation is that Arizona has school choice, open enrollment. So you can apply for a variance to go to different school districts and, just see how it happens. Well, my gen ed was accepted at every single, school district we applied to. My sped student was accepted to 0. Now, I live in a neighborhood that had a very nice school, a lot of resources, A-plus school, on and on and on. But the minute that they see my younger daughter coming and they see a mom sitting behind her saying, inclusion is our value. You would have thought that I said that I was bringing them a child with purple polka dots, a tail, and, ready to challenge them on every front. Look at that face. Does it look like she's going to challenge? So thank you for putting up my kids. But when you have a school that's in your district that is a great school supposedly, but does not have your same priorities or values, the things that you know will create the best outcomes for your child, you should have choice. So we had a situation, unfortunately, where because of the law in Arizona at the time, we had to stick it out for 100 days before we could be eligible to, take on one of the other options, which is like finding a unicorn. And at the 95th day, I couldn't stand it anymore. I pulled her out. We didn't even have another option. She was losing her hair, alopecia. She was having irritable bowel. And she would weep when I would pick her up. And I knew that this teacher who was not prepared and didn't have the support of administration to include a child who in first grade was very much at the same level of her peers. It isn't as though she needed all of this extra attention at that time, reading and everything, that there were problems that was not for us. But for a technicality that they counted her absent for 5 days, did we get into the ESA scholarship.
And to piggyback off of that, who knows our children better than we do? When I became involved in the movement, my daughter, we had just moved into a new neighborhood, one that I could afford, not the best neighborhood, but you're excited. You're wanting to get your child prepared for school, first day of school. And I visited the school in my school district, and I wasn't impressed. I knew my child, and I knew what she needed. And I just felt that that wasn't the platform that she needed to be in. I visited the school, and it was very unruly. I never got to speak to anyone at the school because no one ever acknowledged me. So that right there made me feel like they wouldn't acknowledge my child. I felt that she needed something extra. I went to great lengths, including signing my daughter over to my mother so that she could go to a school in a different neighborhood and potentially have a better chance than I felt that we would have in the neighborhood that I moved to. My mother...
Can you say
Sure.
a little bit more about why you didn't feel like she had a good chance in your neighborhood?
Well, it wasn't the best neighborhood, I'll say that. I knew that moving in because it was a lower income neighborhood. The school in that particular neighborhood was one of 2 schools that were labeled an F that year. And, who wants to be on a failing team? We all want to be on a winning team. So that was one thing that drove me to want to step out of the box and do something different. I wanted to have her in a private environment because I had heard great things about it from others that I know whose children attended a private school, but I couldn't afford it. I was working in a hospital, a little bit more than minimum wage. I was going to school, so I couldn't really afford that type of environment. So again, I transferred her into the care of my mother. My mother also, the district that she lived in, it wasn't the best school district, but my mother, one up I had was that my mother worked at the school. She actually worked in our school district for 37 years as a custodian, but she loved the children. And although she wasn't a teacher in the classroom, she was a minister. She was a pastor of a very small ministry in our community. And she loved children and she loved helping people. So, that gave her kind of, I guess you could say, a value add to what she did as a custodian. She was able to be with students and help them. She would comb hair. She would help dress them. I mean, she did those things that some of them didn't get when they left home for the day. So I felt safe with my daughter being in that school because I knew my mother would be there and she'd watch out for her. But it didn't turn out that way. So, fast forward to now, I'm in the same boat now. I have grandchildren, and I just want the best for both of them, and we want them in a safe environment. we know our children better than anyone. So because I knew what my daughter needed then, I feel that I know what my grandchildren need now. And I want to be the one empowered to make that decision, not my school district based on what school is next to my home, because that may not be the school that I choose for them to go to. I want them in an environment that they will thrive in and that I feel comfortable with them being in.
And Lane, it's interesting that you bring up a doctor, because you would think a doctor would be somebody you can trust. And I had an interesting situation with a doctor in my path to taking my kids through public school. As Elia, she's my 10-year-old, went on to kindergarten and went through first grade. She was failing in first grade. This is a little girl that started school as a reader. This is a little girl, it's the tall one on the left, that's Elia. This little girl knew her numbers and colors. I knew what I needed to have her ready to be successful when she started school. But to hear that she was failing in first grade, I mean, I don't know what that is. I addressed this with the school. I addressed this with the teachers. We got into second grade, and this little girl is still failing. And when I say I addressed, I'm literally going to the school, and I'm like, what is she failing at? Is it testing? Is it, because this little girl is coming to school every day with her homework completed. I sat with her and did it with her. I don't understand why she's failing. I didn't really get an answer. I got vague answers. She's going to do better. This is an adjustment. It's still an adjustment. I don't have everything pulled out right now to go over with you. I'll have to pull that information out for you later, and we'll have to go over it. I almost felt like I was burdening this teacher and annoying her. It got to the point where she didn't have the time to have a meeting with me. I knew that when school got out, the kids were picked up here. And I knew that for the parents that didn't come get their kids, which was the majority of the kids at the school, she would walk them from here to here. And I would follow her, and I would talk to her, ma'am, can we just talk? Do you have tutoring? Do you have, is there any program or options? Does she need extra help? And she stopped and looked at me and said, ma'am, Missy Barra, I can't stop school in class for your one child. I didn't take that well at all. It was hard to swallow, absorb. I felt like I hit a wall. Okay, so what am I supposed to do? So I went to the school, and I said, I need to talk to the principal. I need to talk to somebody. So she said, okay, we're going to set up an appointment with the school counselor, and we're going to set up and the teacher. So I met with them, and the teacher said, well, your daughter cannot focus. Well, this is the first time that I'm hearing about this. What do you mean she can't focus? Because she focuses well at home. You're going to have to give me details. She's just very distracted, and she cannot focus. Okay, so then we need to have her tested. We need to have her tested. She goes, well, you're going to have to reach out to your healthcare provider for that. Okay. I found out the school had a school psychiatrist, which is a doctor. And I thought, okay, I'm gonna send him a letter saying I want my daughter tested. I did my research. I need to send him a letter. I need to make a copy of this and make it official and send him this letter. And so he can have my daughter tested to see why this little girl cannot focus, what's going on, what's wrong with her. And I met with him, and I thought, I should be able to trust him. He's a doctor. He told me that, I'm sorry, your daughter's not failing enough. The majority of the school, 96% of the school is performing under grade level, okay? This is a low-income neighborhood. It's a struggling neighborhood. There's a lot of issues in that neighborhood. You can see it when you go into the school. You can see domestic violence. You can see all forms of neglect. As we walk into the class, we can hear screaming matches with parents and teachers. Well, more the parent, not the teacher. The teachers there were respectful. People would drive up with their car, and there's marijuana smoke pouring out of this car as this little child's getting into school, and the mom's, go, and on her phone. And this is what this environment was like. So to finish the answer to that question is, I didn't get help from this doctor. So I couldn't trust him. I wasn't getting help. He didn't know what was best for us. He didn't have a solution, and he couldn't test my daughter. So therefore, I had no choice but to be my own daughter's doctor. And I have to make those choices for her. I can just accept what he's saying. Who else is going to help her if me, the parent, doesn't stand up and take that power over my child and say, no, this is not okay? Somebody has to say it's not okay.
Thank you for sharing that. I want to take a second just to get a show of hands from the panelists here. How many of us have felt at one point that, or I guess how many of us have worried that we would, let me think out of the phrases. How many of us have been afraid that our school would diminish the brilliance of our children by sending them to school? My kids also entered as readers into our school, and when I was learning about how they teach reading at the school, I got a little worried because I know what the science says about reading, and still a lot of schools do not apply the science of using phonemic awareness and really focusing on that. In my school, I got 3 different, this is the school I fought to get into, by the way. I still like them, but I have some concerns. But I get 3 different answers when I ask 3 different times about how they teach reading to my kids. And so, yeah, I've had that fear that something that my kids are already like so happy and I feel like they're really smart. I know I'm bragging on my kids, which is annoying. I'm so sorry. But like I was genuinely worried that by going to school, they would be wasting their time and they would get bored and they would end up falling backwards, and that was a big concern for me.
So Lane, one of the non-negotiables certainly is that you find an institution, an organization, a school that teams with you. I will never take my daughter to a school that ignores me, that is not, listening to me. I tell them from the very first meeting, whether it's an IEP in a public school, which we've had 2 stints. My daughter has been to 4 schools in 8 years, and we may get to that too. But in an IEP meeting, we sit around the team. I let them know, listen, you may be the expert in terms of education. I just have a law degree. I'm not an educator, but I'm the expert in my child. And so we can have this discussion. And I've sat through IEPs where, PT, OT, whomever has tested my daughter, and they're busy telling me their results. And I'm like, well, what hand did you use? Oh, well, right hand. Well, she's left-handed. Mm-hmm. So and I have sat in IEP meetings, and I have sat in negotiations for major companies in, court and all sorts of stuff. But I get to my own IEP meeting similar. That's the only negotiation I have ever cried in.
I got to jump in here.
Please do.
Because let me
Ever
tell you, this is the fundamental problem we have in education, okay, is the fact that when we as a parent walk in, it is not a peer-to-peer conversation. Suddenly, we are no longer adults. We are no longer in power. It's as if, these folks think we have given up custody of our children, that they can do to our children whatever the hell they feel like doing. And I'm sorry, that does not work for me.
Amen.
And it was very shocking to me. Like, I teach people how to advocate, for crying out loud. And I had no power in advocacy. And they made it very clear to me that I had no power until the tables turned. But I got to say, something that I'm hearing that is very common across here is the fact that we have generational institutional racism in our systems. We have biases against children of color, children of difficult economic circumstances. We have created a system where the belief gap is so prevalent that it comes down to, well, what do you want us to do with these kids and these people? Well, I am these people, and these are my kids. And I have firsthand knowledge of what it feels like to be underserved and undervalued and dismissed and thrown away. And you can hear, and I hope all of you are hearing today, that parents want to step up and they want to be heard and they want to fight for their children. And some of us are successful, but so many of us are not. And this perception that we have, can we show the group shot of, I sent, I got to show you this picture. Because these people that don't care about their kids, that don't show up the way we want them to, we are so often dismissed. This one's not mine, but this is a great picture. Parents do show up. Parents do want to be heard. Parents do push back. You see, these are some of my beautiful Massachusetts Parents United folks. The folks that don't show up, who don't participate. Well, we do show up and participate. But you know what? We aren't stupid. Just because you're poor doesn't mean you're dumb. And you know when you're being talked down to, and you know when you're being patronized, and they're not going to waste their time. If you're working 2 jobs, you think you want to be in community and have a relationship with people who are going to talk down to you and talk to you like you're a piece of crap. You don't have time for that. You are out there trying to live. The limited time you have, you're trying to spend with your babies. So these parents march up on Beacon Hill because they're willing to give it one last shot to be heard. But there are so many other parents that are disenfranchised, that are pushed out, that are kept from information that they need to make good decisions about their kids. We're some of the lucky folks that fought, that had the agency, that just wouldn't give up. There are so many other parents in isolation who are broken down from this process, and that's what's got to stop here.
And a lot of times, it's form over substance. That just because we may not know the procedure, or just because we may not, align with whatever policy it is, to whatever timing, that somehow we, don't deserve to be heard because we don't fit in that box and come when we should. I heard an interesting fact that I think goes to, parent involvement and parents say. I was driving last week and I heard this rule about how they set speed limits. I don't know if we have any transportation or DPS people or whatever in here, but they do a study and they see, they end up setting the speed limit at whatever 85% of the people do or less. So if people are driving on a certain street and some of them drive at 50 miles per hour and others drive at 45, they'll go with whatever 85% or less. They don't talk to the bikers. They don't talk to the pedestrians that get harmed and killed by the speeders. They don't talk to the people that matter. And it just really made me think, Lane, about some of the things that you challenged us with and thinking about before we came to this panel, and the whole notion of who needs to be included and, cut out the BS with the technicalities that exclude parents.
And they do it intentionally. Like, I'm coming in because I'm trying to help you set a plan that's going to benefit my child, and you're intentionally using language that excludes me from the conversation. Like, I used to be that parent that, would be like, oh, there's someone facilitating the meeting. I'm just supposed to sit here and I don't know what they're talking about. Now I go into that meeting, I'm like, okay, this is my meeting because it is about my child. These are the priorities that I have. I'm willing to hear, the things that you're ready to offer, but I've got some real priorities and concerns, and we're going to dance here. Because right. I'm not going to allow you just to do things to my child. We're going to do this together, or we're not going to do it at all.
So I've heard a lot about times in your experiences where you felt powerless. Now I'd like you to talk a little bit about how you took that power back, or how you took advantage of whatever policy environment might have been in your state to try to take that power back. And I say that, by the way, knowing that it's not like a done deal either for some of us up here, probably any of us up here, frankly, where there's still risk and there's still potential for things to go south again. But I do want to talk about how you've taken power back and what policy environment or whatever helped you do that. Let's start with Tracy, actually. I haven't heard from you.
Yeah, no, that's great. So just to share a little bit about my story. When I mentioned my daughter going to the school that I wasn't really impressed with, I felt powerless. Luckily, I changed jobs a couple times, and that was to accommodate school schedules, et cetera. I landed a job at a local hotel as a front desk supervisor. And I worked a 3 to 11 shift. And I happened to be working one evening, and there were some visitors there that were here in our city to tour those schools that I mentioned that were failing schools. And I had no idea about school choice. I didn't know anything about an opportunity scholarship program. They shared with me that they were here to tour a particular school, and when they told me the name of it and asked for directions, I said, oh, that's right up the street from my house. I know exactly which school you're talking about. So they asked if I had children, and I explained it to them. Yep, I had one, and told them a little bit about some issues that I had. And they told me about the lawsuit that was coming up and how they were working to defend parents who were for school choice. And I'm, again, a young parent, not really knowing what school choice was. So I ended up speaking with them later. They toured the school, and they let me know a little bit about, what their ultimate goal was, and gave me their number. Those people turned out to be staffers with the Institute for Justice out of Washington, D.C. And they were defending parents like me, and I ended up signing on and becoming a part of the movement. And that right there made me feel powerful. Because before, you just think, okay, you go to the school in your neighborhood, that's just what you do. You don't really know if you have any other option if you don't have money. But that made me powerful, because I had these people that were in Washington, D.C., who came down to little Pensacola, Florida, wanting to defend little old me and my daughter. And I was very impressed with that. So that is one thing that made me feel powerful, and to be a part of a movement that took me and my daughter into a place that I never imagined. You don't think about something like that. It's just you're choosing a school where your kid goes to school and the education they're going to receive, so that ultimately one day they'll be an honest, tax-paying adult in your community and, thrive. So that was a powerful movement for me to be a part of that, and for her to be chosen to be a part of that Opportunity Scholarship Program.
I have a story about the Institute of Justice as well, intervening and letting that be a powerful story in my life. It's empowering, but the situation is uncertain. So I can tell you a little bit about both. In our state, we have two major scholarship organizations that a lot of families rely on. In the last legislative session, there was talk about not including the scholarship program. There was talk about, well, are we going to maintain the children who are already in the program? And because it wouldn't be fair, right, just to not let them continue at the school they've been at. I went to the Capitol building. I'm probably the most unpolitical person in this room right now. But I went to the Capitol building with my 10-year-old daughter, and I told my lawmakers the story. I was told, go talk to your lawmakers. So that's what we did. We talked to the lawmakers, and lawmaker after lawmaker.
Was this when your daughters were in that in a charter school, was it?
Yeah, they're in a private school.
From the voucher, using the voucher program in
Correct.
Nevada? Okay.
Correct. So they were actually receiving both scholarships. So a portion, we depended on both. So as I spoke to these lawmakers and told our stories, and then the conclusion of that is we found out that they're going to take the children who are already in the program, and they're going to carry them out through high school, which was success, is so we thought, right? However, 2 weeks before school started this year, I got a letter in the mail saying that your child's scholarship has been denied, which was devastating, because how am I going to pay $7,000 per child to go to this school? I work a full-time job. I live in a low-income neighborhood. There's no way I can afford that. I went to the school and had to work something out with the school. And I'm trying to catch my thought. I'm a little nervous, sorry. So what we had found out was there was provisions that were put in the law. So we thought the kids that were already in the school were gonna be carried out through high school, but what they were saying is they're only gonna take the high school kids and they're gonna carry them out through high school. Everyone else is denied. It became a very devastating situation for my family. I went to the school. I reached out to some more lawmakers to see if there was anything I can do. I ended up with a partial scholarship from one of the organizations, which I'm still $20,000 short. The school decided that they would give us a partial scholarship as well. And on top of me working 40 to 45 hours a week and my husband working full-time, I'm off on Wednesday and Thursday. I work at the school. I also go there and work on Friday before I go into my regular job that I'm there for 9 hours. But with the Institute of Justice, they actually came to intervene for me, and right now they are representing me. So the power right there is that I currently have a lawsuit fighting that these provisions and the law that was passed was not passed constitutionally. And so I feel like that's empowering. At the same time, because of this issue, I just got a letter yesterday from my children's school saying that because they lost that scholarship this year, the majority of the children lost their scholarship. They have no choice but to sell their building. This is really devastating to my kids and to hundreds of kids that go to the school. The majority of the kids at this school receive a scholarship. This private school is not in a rich neighborhood. It's in a low-income neighborhood. That's the people they're serving. And I mean, I wish it wasn't too late for the school. So it's powerful, but it's not.
You know, it's interesting because in my work, and probably for a lot of us, we're in these policy discussions where we're talking about different ideas of what kids need and what families need and what educators need and what schools should or shouldn't do. And for most of us, I think it's pretty academic, right? But the reality is for parents like these,
Right.
This is not academic. This is life and death. It's survival. And so thank you for sharing that.
And that's what people don't get. Like, I'm so angry for you right now. Like, I just feel it
I'm
so
angry
much.
too. Trust me.
Because, like, parents and children are under attack, you know, and we have to go up against some of the most powerful, politically savvy, you know, forces in the country that have unlimited resources and ridiculous revenue models. You know, if I could pass a law in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that says the day you become a parent, you have to pay me union dues, like, I could do whatever I want, you know? That is what I am up against right now. And, you know, in Massachusetts, it's the same thing. You know, they came forward with this thing called the Promise Act. They want to spend $2 billion on increased education funding. They wanted us to just send blank checks to districts where we know these districts, no offense to some of y'all, but like, you spend the money badly, irresponsibly. We want receipts. We want to know how the money's going to be spent, and we wanted to address the achievement gap. We had very simple asks. So we killed the Promise Act. We went up against that juggernaut. First, we killed it. Then those parents, we had thousands of parents that marched on our state house that said, we want education funding, but we want more, but better. This is what we want. We sat at the table, we bargained, we wrote the legislative language for them and gave it to them. It came out of a joint committee from the House and Senate. We had this beautiful piece of legislation. Then they're arguing about it in the Senate, and they try to take all the provisions that would take any of the accountability, the 3-year plans that they would have to come up with, in a dirty trick at the last minute. The same way, because they're savvy, they have unlimited resources, they can play these tricks with language in there, and then we as parents, the burden's on us to kind of go in and fight for this stuff. It is so unfair. And frankly, it's us, it's our children that pay the consequences. And these consequences are real. This is not a game. Like, it's poverty, it's incarceration, it's death for our kids if we don't fix this. So this is not a political turf war for us. Like, we gotta get, and my kids are 7, 8, and 11. 3 Latino little boys. Like, they are hungry to put them in prison cells. I'm sorry, but that is what it is. And so I need all of you guys to feel the urgency of this. We all have to get serious, and we have to be heard on this stuff. It's just, I am so sorry this has happened.
Yeah.
Like, I'm so mad.
So I think we're all probably just like one step away from, having been scarred, but having either a scar or a star. I told about my situation. We started out in public school. We were able to find our first unicorn, a private Christian school that was willing, but not necessarily able to continue to educate my daughter past a certain point when the gap gets a little bit wider for kids that have cognitive delays. Did another stint at public school. Now we're back at a private school, which is a little bit more willing and able. But the day could come. It's a private Christian school. We are using the empowerment scholarship. We're very happy for that. And by the way, in Arizona, if you're in the neighborhood with a D or F failing school, you can opt in. If you have a disability, your child, you can opt in. There are certain circumstances, like 8 of them, where you can opt in. But tomorrow, I could get a letter where the administration says, we don't think that we want special education to be a priority anymore. We're done with that mission. It's not working out for us. Then what happens to my child? So we're like walking a tightrope without a net. I may start homeschooling. I don't think she would like that, but I could homeschool. But again, we have options. We have a lot of people that take the time to put together policy. And let's say that beautiful piece of policy that you were talking about passed both houses and went in. Then what? Where's the accountability? A lot of times you have wonderful things on paper like we do in Arizona, but that doesn't mean that that's how it plays out
Amen.
in the school, in the district, in the classroom.
And that's why right now, for the next 6 months, we will be training warriors across the Commonwealth, doing nothing but basically running a curriculum for parents on how to watchdog implementation of this bill to make sure the money is spent well, that their voices are heard on the plans that every single district across Massachusetts is going to have to come up with to address the achievement gap, because we know they won't do it unless we force them to do it. And parents, like, especially the parents that I represent, these folks here, like, these are folks working 2 jobs. These are folks just struggling. I mean, our priorities in Massachusetts Parents United, number 1 is safe neighborhoods. We don't even have guarantees that our kids can walk down the street and not get shot and stabbed, okay? Food stability, housing stability. We got to meet those needs for parents and say that we recognize those and fight for them before we can have a conversation around education. So these are parents in the struggle up against all that, and then they still find the time to be warriors and invest their time, because we cannot trust people to do the right thing by our kids. How sad is that? And that's why these are my babies here. See, I'm all mad, but I'm going to start smiling because I see my babies now. But, like, we have to do it. Like, folks like us, like, this is not a hobby. Like, I have to go home and face these guys when I get home. I got 3 little reasons. And, I'm all they got. I'm a single mom. Their dad just passed away 3 months ago from stomach cancer, okay? I don't have a choice. Folks like us, we don't have a choice. We have to do this work, because it's the real consequences here. So not only do you need our context because it makes policy better, it makes the work better, but you need to understand the urgency of it. We're here to inspire you to act and be better and bolder and faster and more urgent, because we don't have time to be lazy about this stuff. We got to get it done now. Those kids are going to grow up.
Right.
All these kids are going to grow
Right.
up too fast.
Right.
And we're wasting too much time. And these kids right here, when you were talking about, do you worry about your kids getting served? So my ex-husband, who just passed away, he was brilliant. He had a mind like a human calculator. We live right down the street from MIT. This is a guy who should have gone to MIT. He was brilliant. He couldn't get out of the first semester of community college. I didn't understand why. He was so smart. He used that brain to run numbers down the bar. He was the bookie in the neighborhood. That's what he used that brain for. Because his parents are undocumented, do not speak English, and could not advocate, had no idea there were any options. It was get out of school as quickly as you possibly can. Those people don't even like you anyway. Go get a job.
Right.
Okay? I firmly believe talent is equitably distributed, opportunity is not. And how much talent are we losing as a society when we give up on brilliance like this because we just don't think these kids are capable? We are better than this.
All right, this is it. I think I can go for a couple more minutes. So this will be the lightning round, last question, all right, which means you've got like 1 or 2 sentences to answer this question, okay? One of the big challenges I feel like we have in this work, and other advocates I think will understand what I'm talking about, is getting people to care about other people's children. Because we all care about our own children, but it needs to be broader than that if we're going to make the kinds of policy and practical changes in the classrooms that our kids need. So you all have started this work because of personal experiences with your own children, but you've each continued doing this work in one form or another to continue to advocate for others. What do people need to do to care about, how can we help more people care about other people's children?
Well, my opinion about it is that the old adage, it takes a village to raise a child, that still exists. It's not gone away. We need to continue to rally together as parents and help each other. I can remember back when I was coming.
Sorry, lightning round. Sorry, we can't.
Okay.
2 sentences. I mean it. I'm
Okay.
serious. Okay, go ahead.
I mean, I have personal experience. I cannot make this 2 sentences.
That's okay. Go ahead.
We have to care about other people's children because, let me just tell you guys about my experience. I was raised by a single mom. She worked at a casino, and when she was not in the casino, she was either drinking or gambling. I remember going to her at 2nd grade saying, "Mom, I'm not smart. I'm dumb." And the kids are telling me I'm dumb and I don't want to be smart. I do want to be smart, but my mom didn't hear me. She was too drunk to hear me. I failed 2nd grade. I failed 3rd grade. I failed 4th grade. I failed 5th grade. I failed 6th grade. By the time I got to 6th grade, I was introduced to the kids that were using drugs. I was depressed. I had anxiety. I couldn't stand being there. And I went on and got addicted. I failed 7th grade, I failed 8th grade, and I failed 9th grade. And by the time I got to 9th grade, so sorry, I have to tell the story. By the time I got to 9th grade, there was no reason for me to be in school anymore. I got pregnant. I became a mother at 16. I dropped out of school. By 18, I had my 2nd child. But what I don't understand is how did I go from 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, in the same county, not one person, not one educator, not one principal, not one counselor, not one lawmaker, not one parent saw that I failed this badly. How did I fall in the cracks this badly? That's why it is important, because there is kids that are going to retell and retell and retell this story. And that's why it's important to fight for their kids, because I could be that one person, and we can all be that one person for that little girl that was like me. And there is a lot of them in my city, just so you guys know.
Amazing, hard to follow. One word, interconnected. We are all interconnected. And if anybody in this room thinks that something that you do or say doesn't somehow affect me or my children or anybody up on this panel, then you are sadly mistaken. We are one big community. We are interconnected. And I think the one thing that I've seen that's resonated this entire conference, the difference maker is caring. It's that one teacher that cared. It's that one neighbor that cared. It's Miss Virginia, the viewing. It's that one person that showed that they cared that makes a difference in this lifetime. So why should we? Because we are all interconnected, and the one common thing that is resulting in success is caring.
I would say that, I need folks in the education space to respect, to value, and to uplift the voices of parents. Stop being afraid of us We keep hearing you say the words that we're so important and you are so needed. We can't do this without you, but we don't want to do it without you. Once we show up, well, we don't want you here. There's so much fear about, I listened to some charter school leaders talking about like, oh, there's so much fear. Well, we want to organize parents because we really want them to do what we want because they're really powerful and really good at it. But we don't want them to organize too much because then they might say stuff that makes us, think through, the way we're doing things. And we don't want to be challenged on the decisions that we've made. We don't want policies implemented on us. Do it with us, co-create it with us. These are our children. We're much more invested than you guys are. I'm sorry, but we are. We're in this for life. We're not just trying to get it to graduation day. That's like folks that are so excited about the wedding, but they don't think about the marriage. We're here for the marriage. We're here for the lifetime. So it's not just about getting them to graduation day. It's about having them launch into a successful life. Please respect us.
Amen. Let's give it up for the panel.